to catch up on the recording side of things. But yeah, wanted to welcome everyone who is joining us today. Really glad that you could be here with us, and to spend a little time with Ben Reno-Weber, who's doing some really cool things when it comes to the future of work, AI, data science, Internet of Things. A lot of words that we might hear a lot about, and we might not be able to define yet, or at least not without having like an hour-long argument and setting forth all of our assumptions. But yeah, we're really excited to have you here with us today, Ben. And also want to give a quick shout out to you. Did you celebrate a milestone birthday recently?
I did. It ended in a 0.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Well, yeah, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
And, my parents are coming. They've got a few more years on you. They're coming up on their one of their 0 birthdays, their 60th, here in a couple of weeks. So we're looking for new and exciting ways to celebrate from afar.
Right. Well, I was shocked by the number of people who weren't sure which number came in front of the 0. So for the record, it's 40. Yeah.
Very cool.
All right.
So yeah, thanks a lot for being here. So you've gotten to do a lot of cool things before you started in your current role. For the folks who haven't met you before, I'd love to hear just like a little bit of your background.
Yeah. So I grew up in Kentucky, and my life was deeply shaped by the YMCA's Model State Government and Model UN programs. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about international stuff. And when I went to college, I ended up studying international affairs. Went to Bosnia, lived in Bosnia for a couple of years. Actually speak pretty reasonable Bosnian. Came back, really convinced that creating the opportunity for people to control their own economic destiny also created amazing opportunities for people and countries to be able to create their own political destiny. So went to business school, at the same time went to policy school, then sold my soul to the Boston Consulting Group, got a taste of big corporate strategy stuff, and then ended up running a nonprofit, actually that nonprofit that did Model State Government and Model UN here in Kentucky.
Wow.
So 10 years ago, I convinced my Yankee wife to move down here. Did that for 6 years, and then ended up running a tech startup called MobileServe that helps organizations to engage their volunteers. Yes, great beneficiaries of the awesome fellowship. And then when we got to a turning point with that, I stepped out over the summer and started in this role, which is for a nonprofit funded by Microsoft, but platform agnostic. That's really about standing up an artificial intelligence, data science, machine learning, and IoT hub here in Kentucky.
That is super cool.
It's a weird, not linear path.
Yeah, that's what we should tell all students graduating from college, right? Is if you want to run the Future of Work initiative, here's how you get to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's straight. Well, I will say this for the people coming out of coding boot camp. My first job in Bosnia was because I could code in HTML. So I ended up doing strategy for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe because I could make a website.
Hey, you never know where those coding skills are going to come in.
Yeah. Well, so, and I think that's actually one of the interesting pieces of, what we're going to talk about today is the future of work piece is really about the fact that the data economy is going to transform the way we use data and skills, not in a specific job, but across every industry. And, that's scary in some ways because it's going to require a real mindset shift. But in Kentucky, where we're not used to being at the cutting edge of anything, what's pretty exciting is that it's a total white space, right? There's no reason that we couldn't be at the front end of this. So that's the part that's really fun about it.
We're big on a few things here in Kentucky, and maybe a couple things that really have been highlighted during the pandemic, like food service and logistics.
Right. Right. And we make things. So, in interesting ways, that positions us really, it gives us a really strong position to be going into the data economy, because as the things that we make come to have more and more data being exchanged through the Internet of Things. And then the other thing we do really well is healthcare. And healthcare is all about data. Yeah.
So Ben, I've got a quick poll I wanted to pass along to the audience here before you get started with your presentation, in part to give you a little idea of kind of who's on the call and where they're starting.
Yeah, please.
So I'm going to go ahead and make that poll live here. And so if you are attending here, you should be seeing a notification or that poll popping up on your screen there. And just wanted to find out a little bit about who's attending, what your professional responsibilities are. And also when you hear words like AI, machine learning, or data science, what do those bring to mind?
Everyone can spell AI. Almost no one knows what it means.
We accidentally, gave our company the initials AI back before everything. Can't claim that we were that smart. All right, give folks a few more seconds there to hop on the poll. Looks like a pretty even split. A lot of folks with software development experience, but every one of the categories is ticked there, from economic development and research to IoT and AI, which is pretty cool to see that representation on here. Looks like varying degrees of comfort with, what is AI.
Are you sharing the poll? I just can't see it.
If you are not seeing the poll, I might be the only one here who can see the results. Let's see if I can more than just talk through this data with you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and see if that will share the results with you all. Okay, here are the results.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
All right, well, I have a favor to ask of the folks who are, the four folks who are AI and IoT. Feel free to lie detector me. If I say anything that's completely false, just stick a hand up and I'll let you correct me.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna turn that off, Ben, and then turn the floor over to you.
Cool. Well, I've got some slides, but I'm hoping that this is going to be really interactive. So I'll trust our Nick to keep an eye on the chat, and then we'll certainly have plenty of time for people to ask questions and have a good discussion along the way. So I'm going to share my screen. So the official name of the organization that pays my salary is the Future of Work Initiative. And while we're started in Louisville, we've definitely got a focus that's beyond that. And it came about because, let's see here, can you advance these slides? There we go. It came about because Microsoft was looking at what is now what they would consider the fourth major tech revolution in the last generation. So the first being the PC revolution, which they did an amazing job of capturing, and then next being the internet and mobile revolutions. And they did a terrible job of understanding what was happening and positioning themselves to be successful as a company. And also they recognized that in each of those revolutions, the people who were most able to take advantage of them all shared a very similar demographic. They were mostly computer science folks who were largely on the West Coast, where innovation would happen and then it would skip over the middle of the country to the East Coast, to their finance fraternity brothers there, which meant that the people who were able to really create massive wealth and whose problems got solved tended to all look very similar to one another. And they thought, well, maybe there's a way to address all three of these things at the same time. Is there a way for us to skip this dynamic of computer science-driven innovation so that there's a different set of problems getting solved? And can we do that in the middle of the country, next to the real economy, where things actually get made and health is determined? And then could we do that with an intentional focus on diversity and inclusion so that the workforce that's involved looks different than the workforce that is currently largely in tech? So that was the premise. What I'd love to talk about in this, for the next half an hour or so, is what is AI, and get into exactly what it is that actually we could do with it. Let's talk a little bit about what's needed for success in the data economy, because while AI is the buzzword, really we're talking about something much broader than that. And I use the word data economy because there's a lot of things that go into being successful in the upcoming data revolution that fall well below AI, even though AI is what's getting all the sexy media thing. And then let's talk about what data economy means for entrepreneurship, because that's the stuff that a lot of us care about. And what are the opportunities that are coming? You know, as I was saying earlier, this is really white space for most of us. So when I talk about AI, you know, there's a certain set of people who that's what they think of. Or if you're of a certain generation, maybe that's what you think of. If you're a sad person who doesn't get out much, maybe this is what you think of. Or if you are of a certain mindset, maybe this is what you think of. Or this. And I think all of those things are fair things to be worried about, or at least be thinking about as we get through this. But I think the thing I want to emphasize is that we're so early in the adoption curve of this technology. It's like the early days of the internet. So this picture is one of my favorites. It's Bill Gates on Letterman trying to explain what is the internet. So if you think about the other transformational technologies that have happened, you think about the internal combustion engine, for example. The internal combustion engine led to some very clear, like, oh, we understand, here's the automobile. And there were winners in that economy, and there were losers in that economy. The thing that is more interesting is the second order implications. So in agriculture, the advent of the internal combustion engine completely transformed agriculture in two really important ways. First off, it changed the way, drastically reduced the number of humans that needed to be involved because of tractors, basically. Also, when horse-drawn carriages stopped being a thing and horses stopped being a huge part of the economy, that was 20% of the agricultural production of the US went to feed horses. So when that's no longer a thing, massive disruption, grapes of wrath style stuff. Something else people don't generally think about, consumer credit. This was the first hard asset, durable asset that households needed to be able to access credit to afford, and the sellers wanted to make sure were available on the household level. So that was the advent of consumer credit. It was also the beginning of really modern branding and advertising, because you needed something that was recognizable as people were going down the road at 30 miles an hour. So what does that mean for us? Well, the Brookings Institute, and I want to give a lot of credit for several of these slides to the work that's been done by Brookings, in particular to a guy named Alan Berube. The Brookings Institute did a fascinating analysis of patent applications, and they looked for where the patents were that were automating skills or job tasks, and then applied those to the industries where those job tasks were important. And they discovered that Kentucky was particularly dense in industries and jobs where AI would be widespread. So manufacturing, healthcare, e-commerce, and logistics, as we were talking about earlier. So that can be good and bad, right? Bad if we're on the wrong end of that disruption. But good if we're the ones doing the innovating and the the innovations that we commercialize here do the disruptions in the rest of the country. So, when you think about what this means as we move to what Jeff Kwan is one of my favorite AI researchers and theorists. He's at the University of Louisville. He says the technology has evolved to the point where we can focus on the problem. So you think about machine learning as a service, cloud-based analysis of your data. The idea that you could basically buy an off-the-shelf AI chatbot and train it relatively easily. All this data, as we develop these new and easier ways to handle that data, it democratizes what can come off of that data. So we're already seeing, because of COVID, scaling of new models of health delivery. We're thinking about new ways of manufacturing, again, going to be massively accelerated by COVID, because you start thinking about how do we create more distance? Well, you end up with robots supporting different people's jobs. That was a trend that was already en route, but the curve on that is going way up. You think about issues of e-commerce, like can we deliver prescriptions by drone, and robots delivering food. All of a sudden, data lets you do new analysis across the spectrum for value-based care. Can I predict when a machine is going to break before it does? If we're the innovators, that's going to be amazing for us. If we are not the innovators, we are the horse-drawn carriage makers. So I think just, we talked about defining our terms. There's really only a couple things you can actually do with AI, but it's important to understand what those things are. So I'm gonna just real quick run through some Kentucky companies who do cool things with AI. So one thing you can do with AI is identify things. These are margaritas. They look very different, but they are margaritas. And there is a Kentucky company called Enable AI that has developed a margarita recognition algorithm. Now, why would you want a margarita recognition algorithm? Well, if you are a restaurant and you are trying to figure out the most impactful social media posts, you would love to know when your customers or your employees are posting about things that get your customers saying the things that you want them to say. So, for example, if you're a restaurant and you've got 600 locations and each one has either an intern or a manager who's in charge of social media posts, right now what you do, if you're doing any kind of analysis of the effectiveness of your social media, which most people aren't, you're counting impressions or maybe likes. And if you're great at it, you've got an intern counting what are the things that people are saying or posting about that are getting high levels of likes. With AI, instead of that, you can have a machine recognize, oh, this is the kind of things that people say through sentiment analysis when you post about a delicious margarita. So you can identify things. You can also cluster and analyze things. Back in the day when we had derbies, which were large gatherings of people who would come together to watch horses, this map is a tracking of all of the cell phones in the Louisville area as they would come to the horse track and then out over time. Obviously, again, we're seeing COVID with contact tracing, the implications of that, but that's the sort of thing you can only do with really high levels of computing power. And finally, you can predict things. So you can predict whether or not someone is going to go back to prison after they have been let out, which is a huge issue, by analyzing the things that previous people who have gone back to prison. For example, I don't have a job. I am housing unstable. I go back to the zip code where I was when I was arrested. All of those things help you to then say, oh, if this is what's likely to happen based on these things, how do I intervene to make sure that that's not what happens? So there's a Kentucky company, a Lexington-based company, who's already doing predictive analysis for people who are coming out of prison in order to intervene with social supports. They connect those people to social workers and other resources. There's a Kentucky company that is predicting stock market performance of companies based on Twitter sentiment analysis. And several different hospital chains in Kentucky are at the cutting edge of how do you predict emergency room usage or readmittance, which is massive cost drivers for hospitals. So those are basically what you can do. You can identify things, you can cluster and analyze things so that you can say, oh, these are the kinds of groupings of people, and you can predict things. I will remember the name of the company who's doing the analysis of people coming out of incarceration. If you hadn't asked me, I'd be able to pull it up. All right, so that's what you can do. What's needed to be successful in this kind of economy? So the really important thing to understand as we move into this is that the data economy is a technological shift, but it's not the sort of technological shift that's going to sit in IT, right? This is not really about AI jobs, although there will be some of those. This is really about like internet jobs. It's not that there are that many jobs involved in the direct maintenance or application of the internet. It's that every job now is touched in some way by the internet. And that's going to require a mindset shift that is different than the technological pieces. So what do I mean by that? There's a program in Louisville called United Community. And United Community is a referral platform that helps people to navigate between nonprofits. And the idea is that there's no wrong door. I show up at the food bank in order to get food. That probably means there's a whole lot of other things going on in my life upstream that make it so that I am food insecure. But right now, there's no way for us to ingest that data as a community to help connect somebody to the resources that they would need to address those upstream needs. So in the pre-data economy world, the success of a program like United Community would be judged entirely on the basis of, okay, great, it's a referral platform. Did I get you in the door? How many organizations are on there? And then did your need get met? Right, that's success. In the data economy, it's actually much more complex than that because there's utility in knowing about who are the sorts of people who are showing up, full stop. And then even if your need doesn't get met, that's useful data. Oh, we don't have enough homeless beds. We don't have enough food resources, or we would expect that there would be this amount of food need in this neighborhood based on the poverty level. But instead it's this, higher or lower. What's going on there? And that's really much more mindset than tech. Now, I think the tricky bit here is there's a lot of things you need to be thinking about with data. There are real issues around people's privacy and consent and transparency. And if you're going to do analysis of, oh, I would expect to see this level of usage of the social service system, well, that's all based on the data that's historically been able to be collected, which probably does, have huge amounts of bias baked in. And that's just like something that we're going to need to be cognizant of as we move into this economy, because it's going to be everywhere. Advanced slide. Aha, okay. Let's talk about what this really looks like in a personal way. So when I say there's not going to be that many tech jobs that come out of this, AI jobs, there are going to be lots of people impacted by this. So this is a friend of mine. She works at KFC. She's a food scientist. She is not techie, although she is technically literate. What she has been working on is a massive innovation project in which they're combining different famous brands and chicken tenders. And she's very interested as they roll these out in different areas and limited times. And okay, what do people think about this stuff? So it's in the field. Is this going to be a long-term innovation? Is this something we just bring back every now and then? And she's done this before. She's got 3 permanent items on the McDonald's menu, which apparently in the food science world is like, she's like a Nobel Prize winning innovator. So the old process for her was put something out into the field, request that data from the finance department, wait for the weeks for that to get up in their queue. They'll pull it. They send it to her. She manipulates it in Excel and then immediately has to start asking for updates. And she's manipulating it so that she can say, oh, look, this worked, this didn't, or this worked in this region. Now, she put all of that into Tableau, was able to get real-time access to that data, write pretty simple queries, and manipulate and visualize that in a way that enabled her to help guide strategy and make business recommendations in real time. So that's really democratizing the data and making it available at every level of an organization, which is a fundamentally different way of operating. Again, it's not about the tech, it's about the culture. So, what this is going to ultimately mean is that certain job tasks are going to get completely automated. Though you wouldn't guess it by the way that Siri or Alexa recognize or don't recognize my voice, there's actually been massive disruption in the medical transcription and paralegal fields, where basically computers are going to learn to do these tasks. At a certain level within customer service, that's going to be the case. There's a lot of stuff that can be done in an automated fashion, especially as the bots get better and better. But what that's not going to do, or where it's going to impact, are the things that are really human focused. So what if there were community care coordinators who are able to go directly to the people who are most likely to be able to be impacted? What if you had a pool of money that you could free up from an insurance company to do prevention? What if you were able to target kids really specifically about the things where they were struggling with a customized and personalized approach? What if you were able, as someone putting B2B manufacturing machines into the field, if you were able to recognize well ahead of time, well before it impacted performance, when those machines needed some kind of maintenance, and what if you could do that maintenance remotely? So I think what's interesting is that to make this work, there are going to be very different levels of skill that people need to have. So, at the biggest level, lots of people are going to need to be AI and data literate, right? They just kind of need to know what's possible and how to ask for it. And then there are going to be people who actually need to be able to apply this into their daily jobs. And that's really going to be more of the analysis, the visualization, this is coming in, here's a business task. This is something I'm about to do my expenses again. Is there a way to automate this? I'm basically spending on the same things over and over again, month after month. Well, yes, there is. And then there are going to, at the top end of this, or the narrow end of the funnel, or the small circle, however you want to do it, there's going to be a set of people who are very skilled at this. I think from a broad perspective, we also need to recognize that we need to be bringing the general public along with us, because they are rightly scared. And if this is when this happens, because it's going to happen, we need to be able to have had a conversation so that we don't get really terrible regulations or responses, but instead we get thoughtful responses from a public policy and a public perspective. And we have to figure out how we're balancing the talent supply and demand. Part of what we're doing within the Future of Work initiative is working to educate companies about what's coming and what they can be doing, but at the same time that we're trying to build the workforce of people who are skilled in those things. And we have to be consistently vigilant that the tech lives up to our values. I talked about some of the bias that gets baked in, some of the transparency that is not always there. If the machine recommends this, we also have to write it in so that it can say, this is why I am recommending this, before we act on it. And particularly before you automate pieces of this. This has to be reliable. We have to be able to have that data be secure and private. It has to be accessible to people. This is our values. But as we are moving into this new era, we need to be sure that we are thoughtful about how those values get applied, because otherwise things could get bad. One of the most terrifying moments to me in this job was having a conversation with some of the people who are on the cutting edge of this technology, and I made a Skynet joke, and they all were like, "Oh, I don't get it." I was like, "Wait, haven't you guys seen Terminator?" And they're like, "No." Oh man. Okay, we got to work on this. All right, last thing, and then I want to open it up to thoughts and questions. So, within the entrepreneurial universe, I think there are three big buckets of opportunity, all of which have been impacted by COVID. So the first bucket is about how do we help people, companies get into the data economy? You know, when I say that there is no one ahead, this is what I mean. I think it might be the only Fortune 100 company in Kentucky is just now starting the process of getting their data into the cloud. So when, you know, people are like, oh, everything's in the cloud, and you're reading all this stuff, and if you read the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, like, you know, all these, like, no. The vast majority of people are nowhere. And so there's a real opportunity for entrepreneurs to help figure out how those companies strategize around their data, how they understand the assets that they have or don't have, and then how do you turn that data into something that's clean and useful? Any of you guys who have been playing in data sets know that that's actually the hardest work that's happening is, oh man, I have this, but this here it says this, and is this the most recent, but is that the most right, even though it's the most recent? Like, that's the data cleaning and engineering is really important. And then you got to actually take that data and put it in the cloud to be able to apply the tools to it. And then there is a piece of like the actual cultural digital transformation that needs to happen within a company, which includes staffing or upskilling, all of that before you can even begin to get to the insights and innovation that's possible within an organization because of their understanding of their data assets. So that's one whole area of more of a service business, but although there's definitely products that can be brought to bear to help organizations do this. And you know, very few of them currently exist. And the ones that do, there's definitely market space. And the second thing is, can we create value with the data itself? So, you know, there's a lot of data that's available, that open data sets. You know, it turns out one of the interesting pieces when you think about creating a margarita recognition algorithm, someone's got to train that algorithm, which means that someone somewhere has to look at 10,000 pictures that are margaritas and not margaritas and say margarita, margarita, not margarita, not margarita, and then set up the algorithms to be training themselves and each other. That's actually like a really interesting, you know, I'm kind of waiting for someone to pull together that marketplace. And then there's a lot to be done with linking previously unlinked data sets. So I've been doing a project with the public housing, with a public housing institution that has never asked its residents who provides their health insurance. And so you've got a population that is almost entirely on Medicaid with a huge incentive to be doing community level, they're geographically near each other, you know, to be doing interventions that would save money and improve outcomes for everybody, and no one's ever linked those data sets. And then I think there's, you know, ways to, okay, if you have this kind of data, what kind of products can I create that are powerful for you? And some of the people that are farthest along in this are the finance and marketing folks, because they've always had this, not always, they have in the last several years been generating massive amounts of data. But people who can say, okay, great, if you give me, for example, all of your leads and tell me the ones who have bought in the past, I'll be able to give you here's how your salespeople should spend their day. That's pretty cool. And there's a million versions of that because we're so early in the adoption curve, people are like, oh, someone built that. Yeah, someone built one version of that for car sales. Like, but there's a whole nother set of opportunities available in all these different verticals, specialized needs. Like, there's a real opportunity there. And then the final thing is, what's totally new that we've not thought of, or that now there's new applicability for? Like, what could we do with the fact that I'm going to put sensors inside chairs? I don't know. Like, someone's got to figure out, like, oh, well, that probably means this for back stuff. And, you know, can I zap you or recommend when you should get a drink? Somehow we're going to need to be able to trade these algorithms. Like, I have a margarita recognition algorithm. Am I going to sell that to someone else? Who owns the margarita recognition problem? And one of the real pieces of it is get inside companies with this kind of problem, help them not to sell a product, but just identify the problem. So that's where I think entrepreneurship is just, you know, you don't have to be particularly techie to make this kind of business happen. And that's what's exciting about Kentucky, right? We have the companies, you know, particularly with the collapse of some of the finance that we're seeing in the angel and, you know, venture space right now. The fact that we as a region are so capital efficient, and that we have for some time focused on startups that actually made money. What? I'm not trying to get to Series, you know, Q. Like, no, we actually made something, and people paid us money for it. Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I have all sorts of stories about trying to raise money on the West Coast for a Kentucky startup. But we have this great opportunity, and we have the businesses that have these needs, and they know it. So I think that's what's really cool. So I think I want to stop there. I'm just going to add this other piece. Microsoft is one of the people who has decided that there's something interesting going on in Kentucky, but they're far from alone. IBM, Pfizer, you know, they are all thinking about what's going on here and starting to put real investment dollars at work because they believe that have the capacity to do something that is just fundamentally different than what's being done on the coasts. Also, a quick shout out to my cousin Jack Harlow. His song "What's Popping" is currently number 27 in the world. If you haven't checked that out, you know, he's a Kentucky artist. He reps the Ville all the time. So I'm gonna stop there and open it up for thoughts and questions.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. That's super cool. Maybe at the end we'll have to get, you know, your top song recommendation.
Oh yeah.
After I get my margarita, of course. I want that job. I want to be the margarita like image person, as long as you also get to drink margaritas while you're doing it. I think that would only be fair.
Oh yeah, completely.
So we've got a few folks who've got questions here. I'm going to start with the order we received. So Joe, I've got you there. And Joe, I'm going to give a shot at promoting you to a panelist on here, so you can come on here and ask your question, and Ben can actually like see you and stuff.
Cool.
All right. We've got Joe hopping in.
Howdy.
There he
Joe,
is.
how's it going?
Hey, so yeah, so I'm a software developer, working in cloud space. Been doing it for a long time. So how would I get into just data science or machine learning or AI? I'm kind of talking that in progression, maybe. How would I go about it? And do you have any recommendations on books and podcasts or any way to learn that?
Yeah. So for just free training resources that are super easy and digestible, we've got a catalog of them at futurelou.com. And so that's really all of the providers, but Microsoft, Google, and Amazon have and IBM have really digestible little badging things where you can go in and be like, I just want to learn the basics of, you know, Azure. Well, you probably are farther along than that, but I want to think about how I'm doing, you know, cybersecurity in this, and it's just. I was stunned. I knew virtually nothing about this 6 months ago. And without paying a penny, I've been able to go through and get at least conversant in most of these technologies. So that's where I would start from a technical space. From understanding the trends, there is a great weekly roundup of AI news called Inside AI. And it is, I have judged my progress in the space by how much of what they write I can understand. Like, it's, you know, oh, here's what's going on here. Here's what's going on here. And then from a really philosophical perspective, the best work I think is going on at Stanford's human-centered AI. Like, it's just, that's where they're really wrestling with, I think, some of the big issues. And their publications are very readable. You know, there's also, I have to get the exact right, but it's like the Dummy's Guide to AI. Is actually like surprisingly good. It's I'll find the exact title. So that's where I would start. I think, there's so many pieces to this that the danger is that you get analysis paralysis and you don't do anything because it just feels like so daunting, and it's really not. Also, from a strategic perspective, Microsoft's AI MBA learning tracks, which are all free. Now they're intense. They're like 40 hours a piece, but they go really deep from a manager's perspective into like healthcare or manufacturing. And as you get into this space, you might find, as many of the people that I work with have, that part of the real problem is educating the managers. So if you can be like, hey, you don't learn anything about coding. Please stay away from my machine. However, if you were to take this 4-hour thing, you would understand why I'm asking you for 50,000 pictures of store shelves. Right? I need to spend $50,000 on pictures of avocado fields.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks, Joe, for your question, and thanks, Ben. And we'll send out a link to the Future Lou website. So for anyone who hasn't been there yet, they'll have that resource easily linked there. Got a question from Sarah up next. I'm gonna bring Sarah in.
Hello?
Hi, Sarah, we can hear you.
Hi. Sorry. Let me take all these off here. Hold on. Sorry, I was unprepared.
Okay.
Hi. I'm with Flywire, co-founder of Flywire over here in Lexington. My question was, is Microsoft planning on actually investing in Kentucky companies beyond, I guess, just the online resources? And how could we potentially take advantage of that opportunity? And I would frame that around the context that it's, at least in our experience, been difficult to raise money both within and outside the state, being from here, doing kind of this type of work, especially if you are early in that adoption curve and don't, maybe fit a particular demographic of entrepreneurs. So any just advice you have on that would be really helpful.
So 2 pieces. So yes, we're actually in the midst of finalizing a Microsoft, what do they call it, a startup salon that's going to be here in June. So they're going to invite their startup support team, and part of their premise of that is not just around it's really supporting the entrepreneurs, and they are starting to pay attention to entrepreneurs off the coast in new ways. I'll be really interested to see what happens with the funding scene, the startup funding scene, in the next couple of years. Because on one hand, the assumption is that it's all going to roll back and all these people are going to not invest in anything. But actually, I'm not really sure that's true. I know at least 2 companies who have raised money on the West Coast post-COVID, who part of the conditions of that were they couldn't stand up their teams on the West Coast. So one of them is moving all their operations to Louisville, which is how I found out about them. It's fascinating. So because we're much more capital efficient, and we haven't even had the language to say that until recently. The other thing that's going to be very interesting is the Kentucky Angel Tax Credit passed. So I know, right? So that'll make it easier again. And the KSTC money is coming back online. So that's $15 million that wasn't there. I was counting that in the last calendar year, there's $72 million in early stage funding that's coming online in Kentucky, or has already come online. So I think it's going to be easier. It's never easy. At least that's my experience.
Can you just comment, do you know anything more about the timeline on the KSTC money?
My understanding is that they've got an opportunity to get some money out the door starting now, and that they unlock a second tranche in the beginning of next year. So call them.
Great, thank you.
Very cool. Thanks a lot, Sarah, for joining us.
Oh, and I'm going to do an analysis within the Future of Work initiative of all the people who've invested in the Kentucky Angel tax credit since 2015. So we just pulled that data and started our machines working on it. But within a month, we should have a list where we can say, if you're in this kind of a company, in this kind of a vertical, here's the people who have done Kentucky Angel tax credit investments. So stay tuned. Your local RISE office will have access to that, hopefully.
All right, wonderful. I'm going to bring on Justin Hall next. So Justin had a question about what a future worker looks like. So who are these people?
All right. Hello, how's it going? I was muted there. Great talk. Really enjoyed it. I had a question about the future worker. What does it look like? What does the future worker look like from a skill set point of view? And would it be a combination of blue collar, white collar? And would that snapshot currently look different in the next 6 months compared to today, compared to, a year from now?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and I got one more other question of what indicator would push AI and machine learning to the forefront of a hiring requirement?
Ooh, these are all great. Okay, I'm gonna show a couple of slides here because I think they hit on those things. So, one of the interesting pieces of what we're talking about is the future worker looks like the country, right? This is gonna be, it's gotta be a combination of people who have deep levels of skill in this. So that's, this is the AI and data skilled workers, and also people who are training the margarita algorithms. And so I think we are rapidly, where the real growth is going to be is in this middle tier of the AI and data driven worker, where you don't have to have a computer science degree. You don't even have to be a food scientist. You're going to be a nurse that knows the importance of data and can pull up on your floor at this moment. Oh, I'm seeing this patient has these kinds of trends, and historically that means this. Or I'm going to be able to visualize the flow of, parts coming into my organization. Like, that's what I think is really going to be the growth area. And let me show you my favorite picture. I took this on a shop floor. I'm going to see if I can zoom in on this. All right, so one of the coolest things of my job is I get to go to all these companies that are doing neat stuff. So this is a company, a Kentucky company. They make 50% of the machines that wrap things in plastic to get shipped. All right, so factory, does all this stuff, and then it goes through the final door, and there's a machine that gets loaded on a pallet and wrapped in plastic. So I was there while this line worker identified an issue with one of the pieces of production, called his manager over, who whipped up his laptop and starts doing diagnostics on the machine. Neither of these guys have a college degree. And this is a guy from Siemens global team who was there being like, you're doing what? How do I embed communications platforms in what you're doing? So he's watching this maintenance thing happen that's got production slowing, and this is all the future of work. Like, this guy with the camo jacket on has to be computer literate enough to be able to be like, this looks like it's gonna go bad. This guy is a little more, and this guy's like the head of North American IoT stuff. Like, so all those things are gonna be in there. And I think it's not gonna be a hiring requirement yet, but only because firms don't believe it can be. And as soon as they can make it a requirement, they're gonna. As soon as they believe that the workforce is there. Like right now, mostly they're upskilling internally, which I think is also really neat.
Thank you.
Well, yeah. Thanks, Justin. Justin does have a little bit of experience. Quick shout out to Justin, who's our lead bootcamp instructor at Awesome Inc. And
so you know.
He's working with a whole group of folks who made the choice to improve their skills right now. And in the past has also worked with one very specific group of folks who stereotypically said, "Oh, they could never code." Who's that, Justin? Who?
Coal miners.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's why I asked about the blue collar, white collar, because you could definitely see that in the story you just explained very well, how those two worlds are going to collide, where you've got to be able to create and build things with your hands and still do manufacturing, and then do a data analysis and be able to know where the bottlenecks are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked by the shop floors that I go to where they don't have any system for predicting inventory. Here's their system for predicting inventory. Shit, we're almost out of that part. And, the more sophisticated ones will go grab a card and be like, oh, there's 3 more of these left, and like walk it to the other side of the floor where the procurement guys will be like, oh, tomorrow I better order more of those things.
Yeah.
But those same companies, it's like, they might be a family-owned company. They probably have inventory data for 50 years. But, someone's, some coal miner is going to figure out like, oh, I wonder if we could predict this. And then here's the mindset thing. And this is where I think the Awesome Inc. stuff and the bootcamp stuff has such possibilities. Like, the mindset shift to say, oh, I built something that helps this company within that company. Now, how do I spin that out? I was at an appliance factory, and I was talking to one of the women there, and she was like, oh yeah, I built this algorithm for predicting when we were going to need more refrigerator drawers, because that's the longest part in our supply chain, is getting refrigerator drawers from actually somewhere in the backwoods of China. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Could you do that for other things? And she's like, oh yeah, I already built the algorithm. It's great. And I'm like, why don't you start a company to do that for other companies? And she's like, I don't know what you mean. and I think that's the other mindset shift. Like, we got to get people to be like, yeah, that's right. I could do it here and here and here, and then pay me way more than I'm getting with my salary.
Yeah, one of our coal miners made an ERP system, and it had a communications kind of platform with it, where it could communicate when you need those things for maintenance, and do predictive maintenance. So it was really simple and easy to implement. It didn't take the full stack of an AI or machine learning, but it was effective. So that's a good first step.
Yeah, and this is most of this stuff. Like, if we say AI, it's not AI. It's like basic analysis, but that's where the real money is. And I'll tell you the other thing this is where I know we're running low on time. 2 things piss me off in the world, this particular world. One of them is this. In the last tech revolution, Uber was invented by a bunch of finance folks trying to get black cars home from JP Morgan at 10 p.m. Right? It wasn't invented by somebody at the end of the bus line trying to get the Lexmark, right? Where you're coming from a place where someone's car is a great capital asset, and the ability to monetize that would be game-changing for that person. But the finance bros had access to the capital, they understood the technology, they had the mindset of entrepreneurship, and they had the ability to go for a bajillion years without making money. Whereas the person at the end of the bus line, or the waitress who still can't trade shifts online, like, how is that a thing? Right? Or the pizza worker, the pizza manager who's like, I know that 2 people are not going to show up tonight. But I can't predict that, so I can't staff towards it. Like, those are the things where I'm like, you guys, like, the people coming through your boot camp, what are the problems you're seeing? Because the finance folks and the computer folks on the West Coast, they're not trying to solve your problems. That's why we have Slack. right? Like, and I love Slack. Like, I'm on the awesome Slack. It's great. Slack is solving such a niche problem for such a niche set of people. It's like this over-engineered AOL Instant Messenger from 1997, right? But like, how is that a unicorn and the waitress shift trading app is not a thing?
I think it comes down to computational thinking and growing and being able to model, even on that kind of level. Like, where can we reach those people and show them here are things you can do to grow your imagination and grow your computational thinking so that you can come up with these kind of solutions.
Yep, I agree.
Very cool.
All right, Liz Brown, I promise I will find the name of that company. It's like Core Links.
Coresoft?
Coresoft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, they're great.
CEO's awesome, doing great stuff. Like, yeah.
Very cool. All right. Yeah, Justin, thanks for your question here. And now you've got me thinking, as I'm working on my toilet paper inventory system here in COVID times, maybe that's going to be applicable to other people.
Predictive toilet paper. It could customize your individual usage, build household trends.
Tell me inventory levels at the local Target,
Yeah, exactly.
Had two more questions here. One from Mark Maynard. So I'm gonna see if Mark is still on here. There's Mark. All right, looks like Mark is hopping back on right now, still waiting for his audio to switch over.
Hello.
Hey, Mark, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So one of the resources that I'd found, I wanted to get your opinion on, was Towards Data Science. I found it really popular on Medium. It's a Medium's got the microblogging platform, and they've sort of got a curated list called Towards Data Science. And I want to know if you'd heard of it or saw anything on there, because
I haven't, but I'm going to go check it out right after this.
Okay. Well, that's basically all the question I had is you're listing all the stuff that I'd never heard of. I was like, information share and see if you were leaving it out for a reason.
Nope, I'm going to check it out.
Cool. Yeah, lots of great resources out there. All right, very cool. Thank you, Mark. And then Becky had a hand up. I don't think we've got a question yet from Becky. Becky, if you still have a question, if you could do the hand raise. All right, we'll bring you in here.
Hello, can you hear
Hi,
me?
Becky.
Can you see me? Hi. Yeah, I had a thought while Justin was asking his question, and sort of I was thinking some kind of related questions about how that diagram you had with the concentric circles with the different levels of data skills and awareness, how that relates to the future of jobs. And I liked what you guys were talking about the relationship between blue collar, white collar, and I've been thinking a lot about how when we get our AI that addresses various problems, it doesn't come out of thin air. You talked about a lot of the elements of this, right? It comes from data that has been collected by people working on a specific problem over years and years.
Right.
So you still need experts. There has to be communication between people within those different circles, the people who are building the AI and the people who are using the AI, to ensure that the AI is that the people building it know what the people using it need, and can really get the insights from the people using it to make it work how they need it to work.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the other piece of like people who say, where do I start as a company? That's sort of the other piece of the work that I'm doing. And the thing that I say is you start with the business problem, right? Because people often get tempted by the idea like, oh, I've got all this data, I'll just throw it up into the cloud and like insights will come. No, that's not how this works. right? The way this is why I say this needs to end up in the C-suite, but not with CTO, right? This has to start with a business problem. And then we can say, great, can we use these tools to solve this business problem? And then it's a culture change exercise. How do I recognize that my data has value? How do I then go about capturing clean, useful data? How do I then turn that data into insight that helps guide my business? Right? That's very much like, how do I change the way that our culture does anything? And if it gets trapped as, I need this technology, no one's going to use it. And then you're going to be like, oh, why didn't I get any value out of this? This is crap. But that's not how this plays out. So this plays out as, I'm trying to do a better job of, I think it was IBM, said that in all the initiatives that they have been doing, and I give all the big tech companies credit for eating their own dog food. Like, they have been at this and they've been very transparent about their failures. The most money that IBM had made on their AI applications internally was around when they could bill customers. They were like, oh, if a customer meets these 6 criteria, we can bill them earlier. It's their 3rd case with us. We've got a strong, we had the same person as the manager at this point. We'll bill them on day 27 instead of on day 62. And that was the thing that made them the most money in their first wave of adoption. Right, but it was a real problem. Like, how long do you go with your accounts receivable? So anyway, I think like that's the thing where it's got to be you saying, I would like to be able to solve this problem of yarn usage, and what kind of colors am I going to be predicting next? But it's got to be a real problem to you.
Yeah.
All right, I know we're over time.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Becky, for asking your question there. So, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. This has been wonderful. Really appreciate you sharing your insights and the work that you're doing and your efforts to build more of these ties regionally with individuals and organizations. So just very excited for what you've done so far and what is to come.
So I'll follow up when I find out when Microsoft is coming in. We're all in this regionally together. Like, this is us. This is not like Louisville versus Lexington. This is like us and Cincinnati and Indy and Nashville and maybe St. Louis. Like, we're in this together against the coasts. So this is where we got to be sharing resources and connecting with each other. So I'm glad to do it, and I appreciate everything that Awesome has done for the community and for me personally in various iterations of my life. So thanks so much.
Well, thanks, Ben. And for following up with you, Future Lou, is that the best place for us to go to continue to get updates?
FutureLou.com.
All right.
Yep.
We'll be sending it out. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.